Capitol Records, 1750
boy.
Vine Street, Los Angeles, California, 90028. The first Capitol Records office was actually down the street on Vine, 1507, which is closer to Sunset near the Palladium and the bank where the Yankee Bandit was finally caught.
The lowercase records building as it was.
The office was on the second floor above a record store called Music City, or Wallach's Music City, after the owner and studio president of Capitol, Glenn Wallachs. Now, the store was run from 1940 to 1978 and was separate from his record company, which opened 2 years later and would be one of the most loved record stores in Southern California. It was one of the first known music stores to seal record albums in cellophane and put them on display so people could like sift through them and look.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind because I do want to do a record store episode one day.
This was a big one. This was also one of the first places, from what I understand, one of the first places that had private listening booths so you can listen to records.
Baby.
It eventually became more than a store because many bands visiting Sunset for the first time would have to stop there and pay tribute. The Rolling Stones did that. The Byrds, the Mamas and the Papas all stopped at Wallach's.
Mama Cass.
Mama Cass would like, I'm going to have a star on the street one day. Like, hey, shut up.
Not until 2016 when you're dead.
Frank Zappa worked there for a period. It became like a hangout spot, similar to like whatever Amoeba is now, which is really close to that location. So in 1942, owner Glenn Wallachs had started Capitol Records along with songwriter Johnny Mercer, who came from Tin Pan Alley, and an ex-Paramount movie producer named Buddy DeSilva. The first record they released was in June of 1942. It was Paul Whiteman's New Yorker Hotel Orchestra performing The General Jumped at Dawn and the B-side I Found a New Baby. They didn't sell well. But because there was a war going on and there was a shortage on...
What war?
Oh, God, I didn't do research on that. 1942 and there was a war. I'm going to say...
It was the Clone Wars.
Oh, that's what it was. You're right. There was a shortage on shellac, which was used to make records. Capitol understood this, but Wallachs knew where to get it slightly cheaper, so they could cut records regardless. And because it was a war, any record companies that were still putting out music at the time were going to get noticed. The big three record companies at the time were Decca, Columbia, and RC Victor, all of which were in Manhattan. So this new scrappy upstart label had a chance of making waves on the West Coast. And it worked. They became very popular for releasing incredibly well-received jazz and pop albums. Judy Garland, Nancy Wilson, Dinah Shore, the Kingston Trio, June Christie, the Four Freshmen were all signed, and then they had their big three hitters: Frank Sinatra, Peggy Lee, and Nat King Cole, local hero. He wasn't born here, but he lived here. In the 50s, the company was doing pretty well. Between 54 and 58, the sales of albums tripled. But the 50s saw a new musical trend becoming dominant. Rock and roll.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Shaking.
Maybe in West Hollywood.
They were gyrating, shaking pelvises at everywhere for anybody to see. On TV, you are something of a hound dog, sir. Capitol was not on board with this new sound, but they preferred the stylized forms that they were releasing. They were very careful when they signed Gene Vincent, who already had a hit with Bebop Baloo.
She's my little baby.
Thank you. And Johnny Otis's orchestra. But in 1955, the British record label EMI bought Capitol Records for $8.5 million, acquiring 96% of Capitol's stock. Right away, they wanted to start with creating a new record studio that would equal Abbey Road in London. They kept Wallachs as a president, but overall the management of Capitol wouldn't be changed, they said. However, right around the corner was the British invasion and his control.
That's the war you're talking about.
That's the war with the Brits again.
Here they come, walking down the street.
Anyways, EMI pays for Capitol, and now it's time to move offices and create a sufficient recording studio and office space.
That's what that movie's about.
Yeah. Wallachs commissioned architect Welton Beckett to design a 78,000 square foot headquarters building in Hollywood. At the time it was done, it was reported to measure out to 93,000 square feet. I read that in an article. Newspaper thing. Article. The commission work was for a small building in Hollywood, which it certainly is. Capitol Records is only 13 floors. The construction had to conform to a 150-foot zoning height limit that was in place at the time of construction. So it's kind of short. I mean, the needle makes it look a lot longer than it is. And it's also on a slope, so you can't tell how big it really is. Welton Beckett was responsible for the designs of many LA landmarks, such as the Pan Pacific Auditorium, Five Purifies All, Bullocks of Pasadena, which is now a Macy's on Lake Avenue, the Amundsen Theater, the LA Music Center, General Petroleum Building on Flower Street in downtown, which is now the Pegasus Apartments, the Cinerama Dome, the Beverly Hilton is his, and the Parker Center for the LAPD, just to name a few.
Oh yeah, that's where Unterweger would hang out.
That's right. He also designed the Peterson Automotive Museum building, where the Notorious B.I.G. attended a party and was later shot outside of.
Well, he didn't design it anymore.
Now it's 1956. Beckett wanted the design to reflect the early sketch designs of another architect and chief designer working for him, Lou Nadorf. Called for a circular building to be built, the first of its kind ever. Nadorf's assignment was to design a building totally from scratch. He was only 24 years old when he did this, and it was the first circular building ever.
Anywhere?
Yeah. There is much debate on whether the initial design was to reflect a stack of phonograph records or not. Both designers say no. The public says yes.
Yeah. I never really saw it, though. Like, I heard it was, and I was like, yeah, kinda.
The first time I saw it, I was told that, and I didn't really know what, like, I mean, I know what a shape a record is, but I'm like, okay, well, sure. And I always just accepted it, but now that I think, like, I started to question it more, I'm like, no, it doesn't look like anything.
Really thick. It's more like a stack of flapjacks.
Beckett said it wasn't. This is his quote. The circular plan stems from the carefully evaluated economics and sound planning principles. The circular form would require 20% less outer wall and makes possible a smaller service core than would an equal size rectilinear shape. Square or rectangle lines.
Fine, good.
Less wall.
Now I gotcha.
Nadorf himself in an interview says the circular design was more functional as he didn't want another square building wedged in between what they thought that they were going to build two buildings on both sides of it that were going to be taller or as tall, so he didn't want people renting offices to lose view or have less windows. Circular design allowed everyone to have a window and everyone have sort of a view or angle. I've read some places that the building is earthquake proof, which doesn't seem likely. A lot of people, it made
that is good. Speaking of pancakes, that thing is going to pancake.
I mean, that thing is going to rock and roll.
Mostly rock.
It actually made a lot of lists of the most vulnerable to earthquakes.
Oh, great.
Architectural Forum pointed out another benefit of the circular design is that the heating and cooling costs would be lowered by the reduction of outside wall surface, as well as the porcelain enameled steel sunshades, which were a Beckett design staple. It was made to keep out sunlight and glare. Obviously, that's what a sunshade does. The Capitol Records building was one of the first ever to be totally air conditioned. The building cost $2 million to construct, but again, it would have been a lot more expensive if there was any kind of square or rectangle shape. Because it was circular, it probably saved a lot of money.
You save on corners. Cut corners is...
Once you cut corners, you save money. Well, they always talk about circular buildings when they use that phrase.
We got to cut corners here. Another Capitol Records building?
But for both of these men to flat out deny that it wasn't made to resemble a stack of phonographs is really hard because, one, this is a town of flashy businesses. For example, Tail of the Pup or Connie's Restaurant. The ploy is to get your business as much attention as it can get. And second, there's a 90-foot aluminum spire jutting out of the top of the building, resembling a record needle atop the building. So it's kind of hard to be like, no, that's not related.
That's the chopstick and the flapjacks. The ceremonial chopstick and the flapjacks.
The ceremonial chopstick. Bring the ceremonial chopstick. If you notice a blinking light coming from it, it's sending out a Morse code message.
Oh no, what's it saying?
If you haven't taken rigorous Morse code training and extensive espionage workshop like me and Daniel have,
of course. But remind me.
The Morse code message is as followed: HOLLY
No, it can't be.
OD.
No, I thought I killed Hollywood.
I killed her long ago. Spells out Hollywood.
That's fun.
I don't know if that's a sound. I think it's telegraphs. It might be different.
Maybe it's a stack of telegraphs is what it looks like.
The opening building was on the night of April 6, 1956. Stars of music and movies were in attendance, and the ceremony was launched by Miss Leela Morse, granddaughter of Samuel Morse, inventor of the Morse code. She punched a telegraph key, which lighted the beacon and began the ceremony.
So she's the one who put in the original code of that? Wow.
Of the 13 stories, the first floor is recording studio space. Capitol also uses up the second and third floor. Floors 4 through 8 were up for lease at the time of induction for anybody who needed office space. The top floor is the executive suite of Capitol.
Of course.
There's also, get this, I didn't know this, underground
bathroom.
They have like 2 bathrooms each floor. Male, female.
No.
It's going to change soon.
Yeah, take it to West Hollywood.
I got to use a little genders room. There's an underground recording studios, the first ever built for high fidelity, created by Les Paul, inventor of the Gibson Les Paul guitar and a musician in his own right. He was commissioned to give the studios reverb. Today, musicians use pedals to create reverb, but back then they didn't have the capability, so they had to create studio space that was able to get reverb. He built a series of 8 cavernous trapezoidal echo chambers dug 30 feet underneath the building. They were concrete chambers, each have speakers on one side and microphones on the other. If you're wondering how the reverb sounds after this innovation, listen to one of the greatest recorded songs of all time, Good Vibrations from the Beach Boys, to hear it.
Almost called Good Reverbs.
Great reverbs, good vibrations. The first album recorded in the tower was Frank Sinatra Canucks' Tone Poems of Color. He would record many more there. The building is also referred to as the house that Nat built because Nat King Cole sold so many records here and the profits pretty much paid for the building. Since 1958, every Christmas the spire holds up a Christmas tree shape.
We took a picture of that.
We did take a picture of them. We put it on our Instagram, I think. The tree was the first of its kind, designed by the Olsen Lighting and featuring 4,373 bulbs. Capitol Records has invited the families of legends Frank Sinatra and Nat King Cole to do the honors and flip the switch.
Every year?
Every year. It's the biggest tree, I think, in Gallup. It can't be because the Christmas Tree Lane are bigger.
It's not a real tree.
It's also not a real tree.
It's a ceremonial chopstick covered in lights. Wake up, people.
They have a new building and it's going great, but music has changed. The musical values that Capitol represented in 56 were pretty much dumped by 1966 because music had changed so much. The British invasion swept over our country, and the EMI merger, Capitol was pretty much handed the Beatles, and they had no idea what to do with them. Capitol execs wanted to dump them, but a small Midwest indie label called VJ stepped in to control the distribution of the US of the early Beatles recordings. Capitol scrambled to correct this error, but once they realized that this band was changing the course of music, they were like, okay, well, how do we handle this? Even then, like, once they got control, they were doing so much tinkering with the music and the content of the Beatles' work to get their sound to conform to the Capitol sound. They were pretty much like messing with Capitol's Beatles albums are good, but what the Beatles did themselves later was like, oh, that's why they're the Beatles. That's why they changed the course of music, because they had the control.
The Beatles and Frank Sinatra are going to come up in my next thing also as important.
Oh, that's right. That's
things.
Right.
So I'm talking about the Watts Towers.
They built them. You didn't know that? So over the 60s and 70s, the company itself kept going. In the late 70s, they used to have a swap meet every first Sunday of the month in the parking lot. Dealers would come into the lot and unload singles, 78s, LPs, posters, and memorabilia. In the late 70s, around this time, it seemed to start on Saturday night. It'd be like a hangout thing, like an all-night thing. Members of the Hollywood punk scene of the late 70s were frequent to the swap meet. You'd see the members of the Nerves, the Germs, Gun Club, and the Cramps were all there. But by the end of the decade, Capitol Records had enough of this riff-raff and locked the vendors out.
Good. Go to Amoeba.
Go to something that doesn't exist yet. Back to the building. 1990, a local artist from Compton named Richard Wyatt was commissioned to paint a mural on Capitol Records building to reflect Capitol's early years. The project was originally funded by the LA Endowment for the Arts and sponsored by the LA Jazz Society.
Where are you going to paint a mural on that? It's like all windows.
No, on the wall. I think at the parking lot. Like the south wall.
Let's go
I've seen it before. I'm just trying to remember where I saw it. I haven't been there. I haven't driven past there because it's Vine. And where am I going to go? That donut shop that's really good?
Those other places I like a lot.
The Jazz Society hired Wyatt to design it based on their idea for a mural depicting jazz greats and the Hollywood venues that they called home. Wyatt was also behind other murals in LA, City of Dreams, River of History that you see at Union Station, and Ethnic Diversity at the Civic Center Plaza building in Lompoc. For the Capitol Records building, he was given two specific requests.
Rock and roll.
Can you put David Crosby on this wall? Nat King Cole's widow Maria asked if he would show Nat King Cole wearing his favorite tie.
Maria King Cole?
Maria King Cole.
Maria Queen Cole.
And Joe Smith, who was the president of Capitol at the time, asked if he could please include Ella Fitzgerald, which Wyatt was happy to do. He was a big jazz fan. The official name of the mural, by the way, is the Hollywood Jazz 1945 to 1972. Depicted in this mural are Chet Baker, Gary Mulligan, Charlie Parker, Tito Puente, Miles Davis, Tito Puente, Ella Fitzgerald, Shelly Manne, Dizzy Gillespie, Billie Holiday, Duke Ellington, and of course Nat King Cole. The wall is also inscribed with the names of other jazz greats like John Coltrane, if you're up close enough to that. 1992, the blinking Morse code message was changed from Hollywood to Capitol 50 to celebrate the 50th anniversary. It'd stay like that for a year.
That's dumb. Oh, that's stupid. Tell them not to have done that.
You know what? I hate that. In 2006, the company, I think EMI sold to a company called Argent Ventures. And for a while, they weren't really sure if they were going to do something different with the building, if they're going to sell it and put up like apartments there or whatever. But eventually, I think
giant iPod.
And thinking in 2008, they were like, no, we're not going to desecrate a Hollywood landmark. We're going to just keep it the way it is.
Why continue what we've always done?
In 2013, the jazz mural had fallen into a certain shabbiness, so they decided to repaint it. And they got Richard Wyatt to come back and update it. The renovation ensures that the mural is going to be part of the building for a very long time now. Movies where the Capitol Records building has been destroyed. Earthquake, and once again, a tornado, and Dead Day After Tomorrow.
Same one, I would assume.
I would assume it's only like a mile or two away.
The ultimate would be if the H took out the Capitol Records building. So awesome! Yeah, rock and roll forever in life in hell!
It's a symbol of heroin sweeping over the music industry, particularly jazz. The sidewalk in front of the building hosts the Walk of Fame star ceremony for Paul McCartney because the other Beatles are in front of Capitol Records.
Can you go into the Capitol Records building?
They have tours, I believe.
Really?
You can't just walk willy-nilly. But they're going to have a tour on May 21st. Right?
I would enjoy that a lot.
We should do that as a field trip. Field trip!
Everyone's invited. Don't come.
Recently, they've released albums from... No pictures of us, please. We're part of the Illuminati. Recently, Capitol has released albums from Sam Smith, The Decemberists, Ryan Adams, Don Henley, Beck, Brian Wilson, the soundtrack to the movie about Brian Wilson, Katy Perry, and the Beastie Boys. And that's it for Capitol Records.